Hello students, myself Pushpalata, Assistant Professor, Department of ECE, SJBIT. Today we are going to discuss about Python application programming concepts. We will be discussing about Module 3 according to syllabus. We are going to discuss about few concepts related to Python. They are lists, dictionaries, tuples, regular expressions. Lists, dictionaries, tuples, these are the data types used in Python programming language. And related to lists, we will be studying about some of the concepts related to list operations, list methods, and how we are utilizing the strings along with lists and related to the parsing of each line, and also we will be discussing about objects and values along with aliasing and arguments. In the next concept, dictionaries, we will be analyzing what is the comparison between lists and dictionaries, and we will be analyzing how we are using dictionaries using Python along with the looping and text parsing concepts. In case of tuples, we are analyzing how the tuples are used and comparing tuples with other data types and some of the characteristics of tuples along with the operations of tuples will be discussed. In the next concept, we are talking about regular expressions. We will be analyzing how the regular expressions are utilized in Python application and how basically we are matching the characters using the expressions, and we will be extracting data, also combining, searching and extracting some of the expressions, and we will also be analyzing about bonus section for Unix or Linux users and some of the debugging concepts in regular expressions. Now let us start with the concept that is lists. List is a data type used in Python. What are lists? Lists are, it is a sequence of values. When you consider list, okay, there is a difference between list and a string. String, to tell, it is the values are characters. Okay, here the values are nothing but the characters. In case of list just like a string, okay, it will be having a sequence of values. It will be having sequence of values, and those values can be of any type, whether it is integer, floating value, any type of the values can be used to create a list. Now, the values which are used in the lists are considered as elements, or sometimes you also call it as items. Now, there are several ways that you can create a list. When you are creating a new list, the simplest way is to enclose the elements within the square parenthesis or square brackets. Few examples are shown here. This is list of numbers, list of strings, as all the values are separated using comma. The list can be of any type. First example, we have a list of integers. Second example, we have shown list of strings. And you can also have combination of the elements. Okay, so the following list here, it comprises of a string, a floating number, then an integer, and also another list. A list inside another list, you call it as nested list. So when you have a list that contains no elements, then you call it as an empty list. Say that if a list is mentioned with no values inside, then you call it as an empty list. As we have shown few examples here, few variables are assigned with the list of elements like strings, integers, and when these variables are printed, then the order of the printing will be the order of representation of the variables within the print. First is cheeses, it is printed. Next is numbers. Next there is an empty list. So we can follow that the list can also be created within another list which we call it as a nested list. Some of the characteristics of lists are as follows. Here we are talking about few characteristics, that is, lists are mutable. When you consider the syntax for accessing the elements of the list, it is almost same as accessing the characters in a string. That means when you are using a string, each and every character are identified using its index. Similar way, here also lists are mutable and they are being identified or accessed using the index values. And the bracket operator is used just like strings, and the expression inside the brackets that specifies the index. Remember always that the indices starts at 0 followed by the another numbers. Okay, so here we have a list which is assigned to a variable. When you start printing the individual index, say the user knows the individual index specific value which need to be printed, or specific value if the user knows it can be taken for some operation, then you can do it using the list elements by mentioning the proper index number. If I don't want to print all the elements of the list, okay, then we can specify the index of what need to be printed and that can be displayed. Now, unlike the strings, here the lists are mutable. The meaning of mutable is you can change the order of each and every items which is present in a list, or you can reassign an item present in the list. Consider we have few example where numbers is a variable which is having a list of integers. Now there are two integers within the parenthesis. If I want to change one of the element, then what you can do is take the specific index of the variable, then assign that variable with proper value what you want to change or reassign. When you reassign these numbers with the specific index, then automatically the value will be changed, and after you print, the value displayed will be 17,5 instead of 17,123. Now we can think of list as a relationship between indices and the elements. Okay, so this relation which we make is called as mapping. That means here each and every element is mapped with the respective indices. Say that 0, 1 and 2, right? So each index maps to one of the elements. Okay, so there is a relationship between the indices and the elements. Now, any integer expression can be used as an index, and also if you try to read or write an element which is not existing in the list, okay, you you can do it. Here we have some example where we are showing about some of the operators which we use in list. One of the operator is in operator. Now consider that I have a list. In the list, you want to check a specific value or an element present or not. So in is a Boolean operator which is used to identify whether the value is true or false. So here you are using as a checking or testing operator which results in true or false operation. Okay, that means the each and every value or an element in the list is traversed. Okay, that means each and every element will be checked, and if at all the given value or an element is present in this variable, it is resulting the value as true. If it is not present, then it results as false. Say that Edam is present here in the list, so it is returning the value as true, but Bray is not there in the list, so the result is false. Next, we are talking about traversing through the elements of a list. Now, a few common ways that we use to traverse each and every element of a list. One of the method is for loop. Okay, the most common ways that we make use is for loop. Now the syntax is same as the for strings. Now when we consider this example, there is a variable and the variable is assigned with the lists. For cheese in cheeses, print cheese. So for this variable, it will try to go through each and every element of the list, it will print one after the other. That means the loop is traversing through the list and it tries to update each element. Then it will be displaying the result. Okay. Now, if I try to analyze the result, first element it will traverse, it will print. The for loop is having an operation to be executed once it visits the first element, that is printing that element. So first element is printed. Next it will traverse to the second element, print second element. Similarly till the end of your element it will be traversed and the elements are displayed. So if you are applying a for loop over an empty list, then that loop will never execute the body. Keep in mind a for loop for an empty list. Okay, will never executes the body. Okay, so here we have a small example to show. Whenever we want to read as well write or update the elements, we may need to use this indexes or indices. A common way to use or a common way to do that is to combine the functions like range and len, where this range and len, it will try to find out the elements within the range and find out the length of the variable. So once you know the length and the range, using the loop would try to specifically perform or update or modify the elements of a particular list. Say that I have an example here which a list is assigned to numbers. Now when you execute this loop basically traverses through the each and every element of the list and updates each element. Say here len, which is the method which is going to return the number of elements in the list. So there are 5 elements. Now the range is a method which returns a list of indices from 0 to n minus 1. Okay, where n is the length of the list. So range is going to return the list of indices between 0 to n minus 1. Now when this loop executes every time, that means each time when the loop is through, I gets the index of the next element. Okay, here once the loop is initiated, for I is equal to the first element of your list, that is 0th element. Now what is happening, the first element into 2, that is the resultant will be stored in the same element position. So 10 is the 0th element, into 2 the resultant is 20. Now 20 is loaded in the same position of numbers. When this executes until the range, that is until the last element of the list, the values will be updated in the list, and finally when you print the list, this result with updated values are displayed. Each time the loop is through, and the assignment statement here, which is the body of your for loop, will execute, tries to read the old value, multiply it with 2, and finally storing it in the same position. Okay, the new list will be updated and the updated list is printed. Now, as I told you, if you have an empty list, okay, then the for loop will not execute. Okay, that means here what happens for x in empty, so print this never happens. What is happening here, although there is an for loop, okay, since the list is empty, it is not going to execute the body of the loop. Okay, consider the list, okay, within another list, fine, which we call it as a nested lists. Fine, what is a nested list? List which contain another list is called a nested list. Here there is an example which I have shown you, that is x is equal to few set of elements along with the list within another list. Now, yes, your Python language will definitely read the length of this list as 4, because you could see that the positioning according to the indices, it is 0 to 3. So the length will be displayed as 4. That means although you have a list within another list, okay, still it is going to count the list as one element. So the total number of values present within the list would be 4. Now let us talk about some list of operations which we perform on specific values or the lists. The plus operator is used basically to concatenate two different lists. Here I have a list named with A and B, and when I use the plus operator, it is nothing but you are concatenating the values and storing it in the another, or creating a new list of concatenated values of A and B. When you print C, then you can see that the result comprises of the concatenated values of the two other lists, that is A and B. We have one more operation, that is star, which we call it as a multiplier, or the number of times it is going to repeat the same list. Okay, here if you are using the star operator, then the it is repeating the list. So you can mention how many number of times you want to repeat the list. Okay, in the first example it is repeating 4 times. In the second example the list is repeated 3 times. So it is a repeater operation where it is going to multiply or repeat the list contents with the value which you have specified. Next, we are talking about the slice operator. This operator also works on the lists. Here, consider that I have a list T is equal to A, B, C, D, E, F. Okay. Now, if at all we want to display a part of your list, then you can use the first index and the second index value, so that the value within the slice, okay, the value within the particular indices will be displayed. Here the slice operator is colon. Once you use this colon, okay, the colon with the first index and the second index. So first index and the second index has to be mentioned, so that only that part of your list will be chosen and it will be displayed. Now, say that in the slicing operator, if we omit the first operator and provide only the second operator, then the slice starts from the beginning, that is starting of the element. In other case, if I omit the second index, okay, and provide the first index value, then the slicing operator would goes to the end of your list. So when we are using the slice operator, if at all we are removing, if at all we are not using the first index, it will go to the starting. If at all we are not using the second index, it will start analyzing from ending. Okay, so if you omit both the index, there is a case, if you omit both the index, then slice is nothing but it is a copy of the entire list. The entire list will be displayed. Okay. Now, the lists are mutable, and we know that it is often always useful for us to make a copy before performing certain operations, right? Like fold operation or spindle operations, etc. Right? Here also, when we are using some operations, okay, say for example, if you want to modify a specific elements in a list, okay, I can use slice operator on the left hand side of the assignment statement, and I can update the respective values which we have mentioned within the list. Okay, so here I have used T of 1 colon 3, 1 slice 3. So it will starts from 1, before 3 it is 2. So the range is chosen from -1. So I told you, no, the range is chosen from 0 to n minus 1. So here once it is taken as, like, we are getting a slice operator starting from 1 to 3 minus 1 is 2. So 1 comma 2, which is the 1th place, 0, 1, 2, 3. So 1 and 2 value will be chosen, and those values, respective values, are updated with x and y. When we try to print the variable t, then finally we could see the result a, x, y, d, e, f, where the first and second variable or the values in the list are modified. Now here we are going to discuss about the list methods. Python provides different methods that operate on the list. For example, we can see we have append, we have extend. Here append is a method which is basically used to add a new element to the ending of a list. Consider I have a list and I want to append the last element with D. Then we have this method. Methods are used along with the variable names using the dot notation. Now T dot method, that is append of D. What do you want to append? We are appending D. When we are appending D with the T list, then later when we try to display it, the T value will be appended with D element. Okay. Similarly, we have extend method. This method, it takes a list as an argument and appends all the elements. Okay. Say that I have two variables assigned with two lists. So I have two lists here. One is ABC, other list is DE. Now, if at all we want to extend the values of one of the list with other list, then we have an extend method. So, which variable you want to extend? I want to extend T1. With what values? Extend with T2. So, when you try to print T1, T1 will be extended with the values of the T2, and make sure that the T2 values remain unchanged. So T2 values are unmodified. We are not going to affect the values of T2, but T1 values are extended with the lists of T2.